My name is Olivia Hart, and last year, on the most important day of my life, my parents chose a sparkly crown over my Harvard Law School diploma. As I walked across that stage in my crimson gown, the 2 seats reserved for them remained painfully, publicly empty. I told myself I wouldn't look for them, but my eyes betrayed me, searching, hoping, aching. The cameras flashed, the applause swelled, and all I could think about was the sound of their silence. That was the day I decided they were dead to me. But death is simple. Silence isn't. Silence lingers. It seeps into every triumph, every joy, whispering, they didn't care enough to show up. I suppose this story doesn't begin at Harvard. It begins in a small Texas town where humidity clung to everything, including expectations. My mother, Linda Hart, once wore the Miss Texas crown, and somehow the shine never faded for her. She carried herself like every day was another round of competition, her smile polished, her posture perfect, her words rehearsed. She loved beauty, attention, and control, in that order. My sister Savannah was born to fit that world, blonde, sweet-voiced, a natural performer. By the time she was 5, she could curtsy better than most debutantes. By the time I was 5, I had already learned how invisible intelligence could make a person feel. Our house smelled like hairspray and ambition. My mother's vanity lights were always on, and Savannah's laughter echoed through the halls like applause from an invisible audience. I learned to keep quiet, to read in corners, to be useful in silence. My father, Robert, was a good man in the way quiet men often are, steady, tired, and perpetually avoiding conflict. His favorite phrase was, "Let it be," which I came to understand meant, "Don't make me choose." He worked at a garage, came home smelling of oil and resignation, and let my mother rule our lives like a queen whose crown never tarnished. When I was 12, I won a statewide academic award, a big deal for our tiny school. There was a ceremony. My teacher had tears in her eyes when she handed me the certificate. "Your parents must be so proud," she said. I smiled and nodded, pretending they were in the audience. In reality, they were at a photo shoot for Savannah's upcoming pageant, smiling beneath studio lights while I stood alone in a gymnasium decorated with crepe paper. I waited until the end of the ceremony, pretending I had someone to wave to. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my trophy beside me, and my mother breezed past without a glance. That's the thing about being forgotten. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow fade, a quiet erasure, until one day you realize you've been living in someone else's shadow so long that you've forgotten what warmth feels like. And yet, even shadows need light to exist. I just had to find mine somewhere else. I found out about the missing money by accident. I was filling out some paperwork for a student loan when the financial officer mentioned that my trust fund had already been used. I remember blinking at her, confused, thinking she must have made a mistake. That fund was supposed to be locked until I turned 18. My grandmother had left it for my college education. I went home shaking, my stomach twisting with something that felt like disbelief and dread mixed together. When I asked my mother about it, she didn't even look surprised. She was sitting at the kitchen counter, polishing one of Savannah's pageant trophies like it was an heirloom. "Savannah needed it," she said without hesitation, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. "You've always been smart, Olivia. You'll get scholarships. But Savannah has one shot. This is her future." Her tone was calm, almost proud, as though she'd made a noble sacrifice instead of stealing from me. I looked toward my father, waiting for him to say something, anything. He kept his eyes on the newspaper, pretending not to hear. That silence felt heavier than her words. It told me everything, that no matter what she did, he would never stop her. I stood there, my hands trembling, feeling like the floor had vanished beneath me. That night, I went through the papers myself, searching for proof. Every document confirmed it. The savings account my grandmother had built for me gone. Pageant expenses, hotel bookings, coaching fees. All written neatly in my mother's handwriting. She hadn't even tried to hide it. My grandmother had trusted her to manage it, believing she would protect my future. That trust was now dust. I thought about calling the police or speaking to a lawyer. But what would I say? That my own mother stole from me? In a town like ours, no one would believe me. They adored her. To them, she was still Miss Texas, still the woman who hosted charity dinners and smiled like she could bless people just by looking at them. If I spoke up, I'd be seen as the jealous daughter. So I kept quiet, but something inside me shifted that day. A door closed, and behind it, whatever love I still had for her began to fade. The only person I told was my grandfather, Walter. I drove out to his small farm on the edge of town and sat with him on the porch while the sun went down. He listened without interrupting, his weathered hands folded over his cane. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You don't need to shine to have worth, Olivia," he said softly. "You just need to stay whole. They don't know what that means, but you do." He didn't tell me to forgive them. He didn't promise things would get better. He just gave me a place to breathe, a place that still felt real. That night, I lay awake replaying everything. My mother's cold face, my father's silence, the sound of my grandfather's quiet voice. I realized that money wasn't what I'd lost. It was trust. And once that's gone, you can never get it back. The acceptance letter from Harvard Law arrived on a warm afternoon. I opened it at the kitchen table, while my mother and Savannah were busy arguing about which gown would make Savannah stand out on stage. When I read the words, "We are pleased to inform you," my chest tightened. It felt unreal, like a door had finally opened after years of knocking. I looked up, waiting for some reaction, but my mother only said, "That's fine, dear," without even glancing at the letter. Savannah asked if I could pass her the hairspray. That was it. The biggest moment of my life passed like background noise. I didn't cry. I packed instead. I spent the next few months working extra shifts at the diner, saving for the flight to Boston. My parents didn't offer help, and I didn't ask. When the day came, my suitcase was old and dented, but it held everything I needed: books, a few clothes, and a heart that had stopped expecting anyone to care. I stood in the driveway with my bags beside me, waiting for someone to say goodbye. Through the living room window, I saw my family taking pictures. My mother in her pearls, Savannah in a sparkling dress, my father standing stiffly between them. It wasn't a farewell photo. It was for Savannah's new pageant sponsor. I loaded my own bags into the cab and left without a word. The flight to Boston felt like crossing into another world. When I stepped out of the airport, the air was cool and smelled like rain. The city was loud and fast, filled with people who didn't know my name or my past. For the first time, that felt like freedom. At Harvard, everything was sharp and new. The red brick buildings, the buzzing energy of students who spoke quickly and thought even faster. It was intimidating, but it was also where I finally belonged. I shared a small dorm room with a girl from Chicago named Nora. She was kind, practical, and always had a pot of coffee brewing. We became quiet friends. While others went to parties, I spent most nights in the library. I worked part-time at a bookstore off Massachusetts Avenue, shelving novels and saving every dollar. I didn't mind the long hours. They kept me from thinking too much. There were hard days. Some nights I'd walk back to my dorm through the snow, my hands frozen and my feet aching, wondering why I kept pushing myself so hard. But then I'd remember that kitchen table, that casual, "That's fine, dear," and the doubt would burn away. I wasn't doing this to prove anything to them. I was doing it because I had to prove it to myself. Over time, Boston stopped feeling like a city I was visiting and became a place I could call mine. I built routines, earned respect from professors, and found quiet strength in knowing that every step forward was mine alone. I didn't need applause anymore. I had traded noise for peace, and I wasn't going back. 3 years passed quietly. I studied hard, kept my head down, and built a life that didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't hear much from home except the occasional short message about Savannah's pageants or my mother's charity events. They never asked about my classes or my grades. Still, I sent holiday cards, hoping that maybe one day something might change. It never did. During my final semester at Harvard Law, I received an email from the dean's office. I had been chosen to deliver the graduation speech. My hands shook as I read it. It was the highest honor a student could receive, recognition not just for grades but for character and contribution. For a moment, I let myself imagine my parents sitting in the audience, finally proud, finally present. I wanted to believe that this moment could bring us together again. That night, I booked 2 flights from Dallas to Boston with my own money. It wasn't cheap, but I told myself it would be worth it. I wrote them a long, sincere letter, thanking them for raising me, telling them how much I wanted them to share that day with me. I attached the tickets and sent the envelope by express mail. I checked my phone constantly after that, waiting for a reply. Days turned into a week before a message finally came from my mother's number. It was short, almost careless. June 10th is the Miss Texas Finals. Savannah has worked her whole life for this. You understand. I stared at the screen for a long time. The words didn't sink in right away. I kept rereading them, as if I'd missed something, as if there was a hidden apology somewhere between the lines. But there wasn't. It was just another dismissal, another reminder that Savannah's world would always come first. For the first time, I didn't cry or get angry. I just sat there, numb, realizing that there was nothing left to fight for. I had tried again and again to make them see me, but every time, I ended up alone. That night, I deleted the message and closed my laptop. The next morning, I went to class, took notes, and laughed with a few friends after the lecture. Life went on, and so did I. But inside, something had changed. I stopped waiting for them to love me the way I needed. I stopped hoping for a moment that would never come. A few weeks later, when I walked past a boutique window, I saw a photo of Savannah on a poster advertising the Miss Texas event. She looked perfect, smiling, confident, radiant. I paused only for a second, then kept walking. That evening, I stood by the Charles River, watching the city lights ripple over the water. The wind was cool against my face. I realized I didn't need them there to validate me. I had earned every step, every success by myself. For the first time, I truly understood what freedom meant. Not the absence of pain, but the end of waiting for people who would never show up. The morning of graduation arrived gray and cool, the kind of day when the air feels heavy with meaning. I woke early, dressed slowly, and double-checked everything: the gown, the cap, the speech folded neatly in my folder. The mirror reflected someone I barely recognized. The girl who once begged for approval was gone. I was calm, steady, and ready to finish what I had started. The campus buzzed with excitement. Students hugged each other, parents carried flowers, and the sound of cameras clicking filled the air. I walked alone toward the ceremony, my heels tapping against the pavement, trying not to think about the 2 seats reserved with my family's names on them. I had asked for those seats weeks ago, still clinging to a small, foolish hope that maybe they would surprise me. But deep down, I already knew they wouldn't come. When the procession began, I took my place among hundreds of graduates dressed in crimson robes. The crowd stretched across the green lawn, a sea of faces glowing with pride. As the speeches began, I scanned the audience. There they were, 2 empty chairs near the front, untouched, the name tags still pinned to the backs. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to look away. Then I saw something that broke the heaviness in my chest. In the 3rd row, near the aisle, sat my grandfather Walter, his old hat resting in his lap, his hands clapping even before my name was called. Next to him was Ethan, his face beaming, eyes bright with pride. The sight of them filled the hollow space I'd carried for years. They had come, and they were enough. When my name echoed through the speakers, time seemed to slow. I walked across the stage, the weight of the robe brushing against my legs, the lights shining too bright. The applause thundered, and though I tried to hold my composure, a tear slipped down my cheek. I reached for my diploma, shook hands with the dean, and glanced at the crowd again. Walter was on his feet, cheering with his cane raised high. Ethan clapped until his palms must have burned. In that instant, something inside me settled. I didn't feel empty anymore. I wasn't walking alone. I was walking toward the life I had chosen, surrounded by people who had chosen me back. Later, after the ceremony, we sat together under a tree near the edge of campus. Walter handed me a small silver locket that once belonged to my grandmother. Inside was a tiny photo of her holding me as a baby. "You made it, kid," he said with a smile that reached his eyes. Ethan took a picture of us, the 3 of us grinning against the soft evening light. Somewhere far away, my parents were clapping for Savannah on another stage. I didn't need to see it to know. Let them have their applause, their glitter, their crowns. I had my moment, real, simple, and honest. The sound of Walter's slow, proud clap was worth more than all the noise in the world. A few days after graduation, I was packing up my dorm when my phone began buzzing nonstop. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just friends sharing photos from the ceremony. But then I saw the notification. My cousin Emma had posted a picture of me standing on stage, holding my diploma, the caption written in bold. She did it all alone. It was a simple sentence, but it carried a truth everyone could feel. The photo showed me in my gown, smiling, with 2 empty chairs visible in the background. Within hours, it began spreading online. Old neighbors, teachers, and people from my hometown shared it again and again. Someone tagged my mother. Someone else added the headline: "Former Miss Texas Skip's daughter's Harvard graduation for Pageant." At first, I didn't think much of it. I had already let go of their approval. But by the next morning, my inbox was full of messages. Some from classmates sending congratulations, others from people I barely knew, apologizing for how my family had treated me. I scrolled through the comments and felt a strange mix of sadness and disbelief. Then the local news stations picked it up. A reporter called it a tale of priorities gone wrong. People who had once worshipped my mother were now questioning her choices. The same women who used to sit beside her at charity luncheons were whispering behind her back. Social media was flooded with harsh comments, mocking her image of perfection. My mother, who had spent her whole life trying to look flawless, couldn't control the story anymore. Every post, every photograph from my graduation was another reminder of what she had ignored. She had built her reputation on grace and glamour, but now the world saw something else, a woman who abandoned her daughter for a beauty contest. I didn't celebrate or gloat. I just watched quietly from my small apartment in Cambridge as everything unfolded. I hadn't planned any of it. It all happened on its own. That was the strange part. It was like life itself had decided to even the score. For years, I had been the one humiliated and forgotten, but now it was her turn to face the silence, the judgment, the pity. A few days later, I received a message from my father. It was short. "Your mother isn't taking it well." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Ethan tried to comfort me. "You didn't do anything wrong," he reminded me. "People are just seeing the truth for once." He was right. Still, I couldn't help feeling the weight of it all. Revenge hadn't been my goal, but it had found its way to them anyway, quiet, sharp, and merciless. One evening, I sat by my window as the city lights flickered outside. I realized that I didn't need their apology anymore. The world had already exposed the truth they worked so hard to hide. And for the first time, I understood what justice could look like without anger. Simply the truth standing in the open for everyone to see. The first call came late at night. My phone lit up with my mother's name, and for a moment, I almost didn't answer. When I finally did, her voice came through sharp and angry. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she shouted before I could speak. "You've embarrassed me in front of everyone." Her tone carried more outrage than pain, as if her image mattered more than what had actually happened. I tried to stay calm. "I didn't do anything," I said quietly. "Someone took a picture. That's all." She scoffed, her breath uneven. "You could have stopped it. You could have asked them to take it down. You wanted this attention. You've made us look like monsters." Her words hit like stones, not because they were true, but because she still couldn't see past herself. I could almost picture her pacing the living room, clutching her phone, terrified of losing the admiration she'd spent decades collecting. Before I could reply, she hung up. An hour later, I saw a new post online, Savannah, sitting on her bed, mascara streaking down her cheeks, speaking directly to the camera. Between shaky breaths, she said she loved me, but that I had turned people against her. She called me jealous, claiming I was trying to ruin her big moment. The video spread quickly. People commented, divided between pity and disbelief. Some defended her, others saw through the act. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The next day, my father called. His voice was low and tired. "Your mother's not herself," he said. "She's under a lot of pressure. Maybe if you posted something to calm things down." I cut him off. "I'm not fixing this. I didn't start it." There was silence on the line. Then he sighed, the same way he always did when he didn't want to pick a side. "You know how she is," he said finally. She cares too much about what people think." "She cares about herself," I replied. "That's the problem." He didn't argue. The call ended with a quiet click. Days passed, and the story refused to fade. News outlets continued to talk about it. Old friends distanced themselves from my mother. Sponsors pulled out from Savannah's events, and whispers filled the town. My mother tried to defend herself in interviews, saying the whole thing was exaggerated, but her words sounded rehearsed and hollow. The more she spoke, the worse it became. From afar, I watched their perfect world start to crumble. The glossy pictures, the proud smiles, the careful lies, all of it fell apart. But instead of satisfaction, I felt something closer to sadness. Not because they were suffering, but because they still couldn't admit the truth. Ethan told me to let it go, and I tried. But sometimes at night, I imagined them sitting in that big, quiet house, unable to face each other. The silence that once belonged to me was finally theirs. They had spent years pretending everything was beautiful, and now the mask had cracked beyond repair. It was a gray afternoon when my father showed up in Boston. I hadn't expected him. He called from the airport, saying he wanted to see me for a few minutes. His voice sounded different, quieter, older somehow. We met at a small cafe near the river. He looked thinner, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered. When he saw me, he smiled faintly, as if unsure he still had the right to. For a while, we sat without speaking. The smell of coffee hung in the air, and the sound of rain tapped softly on the windows. Finally, he said, "You look good, Olivia." I nodded, waiting. He stirred his cup even though he hadn't added sugar. Then, without looking up, he said, "I chose peace over you, and I lost both." The words were quiet but clear. They sat between us like something heavy and final. I didn't know how to respond. There was nothing to fix anymore. I just looked at him and said, "You could have stopped her." He met my eyes for the first time. "I know," he said. "I thought keeping the peace meant keeping the family together. I was wrong." We talked for a while, mostly about small things, his work, the house, the weather back home. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. When he left, he hugged me like someone saying goodbye to a person they had already lost. As he walked out into the rain, I realized that was probably the last time I'd ever see him. A few days later, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice came through thick with tears. "Olivia, I never wanted to hurt you," she said. "I just wanted Savannah to have the chances I never did. I thought I was doing the right thing." I listened in silence, letting her words spill out. She cried harder, repeating how sorry she was, how misunderstood everything had been. When she finally stopped to breathe, I said calmly, "And I just wanted a mother." There was nothing more to add. The line went quiet, the sound of her crying fading into stillness. Then the call ended without a goodbye. I sat there holding the phone, not angry, not relieved, just empty. That night, I went for a walk through the city. The streets glowed with streetlights reflecting on wet pavement. I passed groups of laughing students, couples holding hands, people living their ordinary lives. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was missing something. I had waited for years for words that would make things right, but when they finally came, they meant nothing. The past couldn't be repaired with tears or regret. It was gone, burned out like an old light bulb. I felt a strange calm settle inside me. Not joy, not pain, just peace. Some wounds don't close, they simply stop bleeding. And that, I realized, was enough. Starting my new job after law school felt like stepping into a different world. The office wasn't fancy, just a few rooms filled with case files, secondhand furniture, and people who actually cared about what they were doing. The nonprofit focused on helping children who had been used or mistreated by industries that promised fame but delivered pain. Many of the cases involved young girls pushed into modeling or beauty contests. Every time I read their stories, I thought of Savannah and the world I had grown up around. It gave my work a personal fire. The first case I worked on was about a 10-year-old girl whose parents had forced her into endless competitions, taking her earnings and threatening her when she wanted to quit. I met her during a counseling session. She was small and quiet, her hands twisting the edge of her sleeve. Something about her eyes reminded me of myself at that age, eager to please, terrified to disappoint. Helping her find her voice felt like healing a part of my own past. The work was exhausting. The hours were long, and the cases often broke my heart. But it gave my life direction. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was building something solid. The courtroom became my stage, not for applause, but for truth. Every win mattered, not because of recognition, but because it meant one more child had a chance at freedom. Ethan was there through it all. He finished medical school and started his residency in Boston. Our schedules rarely matched, but somehow we made it work. We'd meet late at night, sharing takeout on the couch, trading stories from our days. He never told me to slow down or to stop caring so much. He just listened, steady and sure, grounding me when the world felt too heavy. One winter evening, after a long week of hearings, he asked me to walk with him along the river. Snow was falling softly, and the city lights shimmered on the water. We stopped near the bridge where we'd first met years ago. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. "You've spent your whole life fighting for others," he said. "Let me fight for you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The cold air stung my cheeks as I nodded, tears mixing with the snow. It wasn't a grand proposal, but it was real, simple, honest, and everything I had ever wanted. We built a quiet life together. Our apartment was filled with books, laughter, and the smell of Ethan's terrible attempts at cooking. Weekends were for rest and long walks in the park. I found peace in the rhythm of ordinary days. There were no crowns, no trophies, no performances, just love that didn't need to be earned. Sometimes, when I helped another child escape the pressure of forced perfection, I thought about how far I'd come. The girl who once stood in her sister's shadow had become someone who stood for others. My life wasn't perfect, but it had purpose. And that was worth everything. My grandfather's passing came quietly, without warning. He was sitting in his favorite chair, a book still open on his lap, when his heart simply stopped. The call came early in the morning. I didn't cry right away. I sat by the window, watching the sunlight spread across the buildings, feeling both sorrow and calm. He had lived a long, full life, and he had loved me when no one else truly did. That thought alone eased the ache. A few weeks later, I received an envelope with his handwriting on it. Inside was a short note that read, "You have won not with a crown, but with freedom." I read it several times, letting the words settle inside me. My grandfather had always believed that real success wasn't about applause or recognition, but about peace of mind. He had seen what the world valued and had quietly chosen something better: honesty, kindness, truth. I framed his letter and hung it beside my Harvard diploma. They belonged together, one proof of achievement, the other a reminder of meaning. Life found a gentle rhythm after that. My work at the nonprofit grew, and so did the number of children we helped. Ethan and I built a calm, steady life filled with small, real joys, sharing meals, late-night talks, long walks by the river. There was no pretending, no performance, just quiet understanding. The silence that once made me feel alone had become something peaceful. I thought of my parents sometimes, but the anger was gone. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. The difference was mine gave me peace. I didn't need their apology anymore. What I had built, a life of purpose and love, was enough. Looking back, I realized that everything that once hurt me had guided me toward strength. The girl who once stood in the background had grown into someone free and whole. My grandfather's words were true. My victory wasn't loud, but it was lasting. And in that calm, I finally understood that I hadn't just survived my past. I had become someone it could never touch again. Do you think I was right to cut them off completely, or should I have opened the door one last time? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more powerful stories like mine.